What Christoph uses in the rendition of horror films is the emotion of disgust. And he constantly disgusts us with his different, visions and insinuations.
Normally, horror films are about confined space. It's about a house, a castle. It's very, very rarely more than that. For Silent Hill, we have to deal with a complete town.
We basically have created the entire town of Silent Hill, which is completely deserted, covered in ash, and occasionally consumed by the most malevolent spirits imaginable.
It's been such a gift. We actually have this wonderful atmosphere and these sets that just really set the stage for us to play.
But I think it's great that it's slightly like that.
Since a long time, I wanted to work with Carol Spear, who's a very important production designer.
She's facing it and they just bend slightly.
Silent Hill is a town that has been abandoned for 30 years. The paint is peeling, the walls are crumbling. We had to show things in like 3 or even 4 variations. I mean, we had a set sometimes, other than having one look, had 3 or 4 looks.
We have 4 different Silent Hill. So we have a Silent Hill as it exists now today. We have Silent Hill like it was 30 years ago. We have Silent Hill in the fog, and we have a Silent Hill when the darkness arrives and when all the nightmares and the creatures appear.
Basically, there's a new set every 60 seconds. So it's a visual feast. There's constantly something new to look at.
We were dealing with 106 different sets and locations in the film. It's huge. I mean, for a horror film, I think it's maybe the first time it happened.
It was a real challenge to try to put all the sets together and just to create the texture. I have a passion for movies with texture, and texture just, comes with the aging of sets. So I like sets that can have some age and also some history to them.
Quiet, action.
We found Silent Hill in Brantford. It was probably one of the best finds that we had found in terms of finding a location.
She told us, I know a town not far away from Toronto. You will have the type of industrial look that you were looking for to build around that the universe of Silent Hill.
Some of the businesses had closed out. They were going through some renovations, so a lot of sections of the whole street had closed down because they were going to renovate it. We were able to go in and redress and basically to make it look like the town had been abandoned for 30 years.
Then you have the sets in the foggy world where there's a certain benign malevolence to them.
Everything's gray, there's not much color. The color is more desaturated. Everything is falling apart and dilapidated.
The mountain was just the bane of my existence. It was, it looked like a road, a mountain road. We built it so we wouldn't have to do all those CGI shots putting in fog, and the only way to guarantee that we could control the fog was to build it indoors.
So we spent 8 weeks building the side of the mountain and then putting a road in and asphalting it. Then the darkness, everything is rusted, everything's decaying even further. It's just a world of rust and blood. And as we get further and further into the story, it goes from a very slight bit of rusting as she goes into the first set of darkness up to the hospital at the end where the walls are almost covered in blood.
It's quite horrific, it's almost like a mental hospital that's covered in blood and gore, and it's just very spooky and very disturbing.
Maybe get some of those fake blood.
I like very much the set where we have the darknesses playing around because it's a hospital, but everything is decay, everything doesn't exist except in most of your nightmare vision.
The hospital was 2 sections. We had a location that we used for the upper floors of the hospital. It was actually a school that we changed into a hospital. That was all aged and made to look like it had been abandoned for 30 years. And then the elevator section was built separately and shot separately. And then this section was the basement. This is the main corridor of the hospital set in the basement. It was revamped and used to make up several different corridors within the space.
They give us back our purity.
Purity!
The sets that I've worked on are remarkably beautiful in the sense that they really serve the universe of the film.
We looked for an old factory that was a big, large space with a lot of texture that we could put this meeting hall in the middle, that they had this sort of secret meeting place. The design of the factory is based on looking at a lot of photographs of old Amish meeting halls, and they're very simple designs and very, very straightforward, and I was trying to keep the lines very straight. After they finished shooting the meeting hall scenes, we came back in, ripped it apart, tore the hole through the floor, and spent a long time burning wood out in the back of the studio and brought it in and basically created an aftermath of the fire. It was one of the dirtiest sets we worked on. People would come out of there at the end of the day in their white coveralls, totally black.
My favorite set is the old school that we worked at. And it used to be a girls' school, a real girls' school, which is good because that's what it was supposed to be.
The school was interesting. It was fun to do because we cheated so much. We actually had a school location, but the actual layout of the real school and the layout of the school that we shot were two different things. And we were cheating rooms that were corridors and rooms that were supposedly off of one another. Some parts of the school were in other buildings. It was a bit of a puzzle putting it all together while we were shooting. In the classroom, we had to deal with 3 stages. We tried to prep it as much as possible at the beginning, and we tried to shoot it in order. We shot it with the past first, but they prepared a lot of the walls first. They used the release agent, which was just a simple lard underneath all of the paint, so that we had a nice clean paint job for the past, and then for the foggy world, we could release a lot of that paint and have a lot of peeling paint. We had a lot of areas prepared behind the walls that we could take tiles away and exposed bricks and studs. It's hard to say what my favorite set was. I mean, I enjoyed working on the church because it's just the scale of it.
I walked into it and I had a visceral response to the space. The degree of detail and specificity evoke an emotion in you, being in them as an actor.
Basically, we are looking inside the church.
The church was one of the first things that we started to draw up because we had an idea at the beginning. We did a lot of reference at looking at different churches that were in the Toronto area and outside of Toronto. We wanted it to be dark. We kept it fairly dark, lots of wood. It's sort of a real church in the typical traditional layout of a church, but it doesn't have the altar area. Instead it has the painting of the burning witch, not normal for a typical church. And then it has the sunken pit for the meeting areas. We spent about 8 weeks building the church. The painting was done by a scenic artist here in Toronto. His name is John Fraser. And he probably spent 3 weeks working on the painting at night while we were building the set around him. He'd come in afterward as we went home, and he'd put the lights on and paint away. We'd come in the morning and there'd be a little more built. We actually took pictures of some of the art department people in some of the costumes of the and painted them into the painting. You probably wouldn't be able to pick them out, but there are a few art department people in there. We used Deborah as the guide for the painting. We didn't want it to be Dahlia, but we wanted it to look like it could have been an ancestor of Dahlia's or Christabella's. The ladders were based on a design that we found. It was an old German etching of a witch burning. We decided to hang the miners from the ceiling in the church after seeing photographs of how miners in actual coal mines would store their gear on pulley systems as they came up out of the mines. They would have baskets with their masks and their work clothes in it. So we thought it was an interesting idea and decided to store all of our miners' costumes in the church this way.
Action!
Then we tried to find the exterior of the church, and we looked at a lot of different churches just for our look of the church, because we didn't really want it to look too Christian. We wanted it to have a very distinctive look. Consequently, we ended up settling on not a real church, but the actual facade of a Masonic temple. And the stairs leading up to the church, we had tried to find locations for it, but we just couldn't find what we wanted. So we built in the studio a set of stairs that we then composited the church at the top of the stairs, and then we put the face of the church on the outside of our interior set.
I think people are going to be surprised. People are going to be surprised by the scale of the film. And I hope that it will help to redefine a new kind of horror film.